Hey, good evening. This is Nicolina Nixon. You're here for another episode of Women, Wit, and Wine. Tonight's episode is Ethical Porn for Dicks by author and therapist,
and
psychologist.
Psychologist.
PhD, Dr. David Lay. So I think it's an interesting subject. Of course, I'm here with my co-host, Judith Edwards.
Hey!
And Dr. Lay.
Thanks for having me.
Do I call you David or Doctor?
It depends. You bought me wine, so you can call me whatever you like.
Just don't call you late for dinner.
Yeah, there you go. I think we can arrange that. What do you think, Nicolina?
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's awesome.
With the last name Lay, I had two options, right? I could be a sex doctor,
Mm-hmm.
or a politician involved in a sex scandal. I really looked closely at that one, but ultimately Anthony Weiner holds the title. And I couldn't compete. He continues to defend the title. So I said, I'm going to go the sex doctor route.
Right. Absolutely.
And I don't even think I don't think he's gotten the joke. I don't think he's
No.
I don't think it's dawned on him yet that maybe with the last name of Weiner, perhaps you shouldn't be doing the dick pic thing.
Right, yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Just possibly, right? I don't know. It might be a good career
Sometimes
choice.
you just got to be careful what you put out there. So, tonight's wine is a red, dry wine. It's called Bull's Blood. And for me, it's a little fitting because, take the bull by the horns. Horn for dick.
Yes. Well, actually, where I thought you were going was my first book is called Insatiable Wives, Women Who Stray and the Men Who Love Them, and it's about the cuckold fetish. The cuckold fetish is where wives have sex with other men with their husband's permission and encouragement. And the other men are typically called bulls. Mm-hmm. And so when
See, I didn't know that.
There you go. I thought it was perfect.
This is so that's even more perfect. That makes me excited. Blah. I'm having a blah moment. So it's very funny you talk about your name. My name is Nicolina Nix. And I have a joke about it. It's because my name means Little Nicky, Nicolina in Italian. I'm not Italian. I was just named after an Italian. And my last name means nothing. So I'm Little Nicky Nothing.
Little Nicky Nothing. That's kind of cool, actually. That'd be a great album. Yeah,
I just absolutely think that it would be a great children's book for self-esteem. Mm-hmm. Little Nicky Nothing. Not that I write children's books. Mm-hmm. I think people would be pretty traumatized by the children's books that I write. So, what got you started writing?
Yeah, doing this kind of stuff. I'm a traditionally trained psychologist. I like most therapists, like most psychologists, I got no training in sexuality. Most people don't realize this, that 95% of therapists have no training in sexuality, which is really kind of fucked up, given that sexuality issues are one of the things that bring people to therapy.
Absolutely.
So most therapists end up diagnosing, based on whether they would do it or not, or whether they've done it or not. Mm-hmm. If you have more sex than your therapist, then you're an nymphomaniac. I started working with sex offenders, and which is hard work. But over time, people started referring more alternative sexuality cases to me. So this was, and this was in the 90s, and it was cases of swingers or open relationship or kinky kind of stuff, and so it was all the stuff that we're talking about very openly about now. But 15, 20 years ago,
not at all.
Not at all. We really weren't. And so I started practicing more with those folks, oftentimes because they just really struggle to get good therapy and support that's not shaming. But back in 2007 or so, I was clinically depressed. I was banging my head against the wall with managed care and state bureaucracy because I run a very large community mental health center in my day job. And I ran across these couples that lived the coupled lifestyle, where the wives are very promiscuous, with the husband's enthusiastic support. And my initial reaction was that can't be healthy. That's got to be crazy. That's crazy. And but both these couples were remarkably healthy. The wives were high end professionals, professors. And they had incredible communication skills. And I said, well, this is very interesting. And I'd always wanted to write a book. There was nothing written about this lifestyle. And I said, well, let me go research it. So I travel a lot for business, and when I would travel, I'd post ads on Craigslist looking for couples that were living this lifestyle. And they would send me naked pictures of the wife, and I would say, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to keep those for later. Very nice.
There you go.
But I really just want to interview you. I want to hear about your life and how you're doing this. And at the end of it, I had a book. Because there was nothing written about it, I had a contract in 6 weeks. And I started on this kind of path of writing about sexuality and becoming this kind of media psychologist talking about sexuality issues from the perspective of, look, you people have got to stop shaming people just because they are engaging in sexual behaviors that you think are different. Mm-hmm. The only reason we don't hear more about these sexual behaviors is just because we don't talk about them, because we keep them secret. They've been shamed. And, since, 50 Shades of Grey, internet porn, gay marriage, society has become much more, sexually diverse and accepting of sexual diversity. And so all of a sudden, the stuff I've been writing and talking about is mainstream. And it's really neat. I get to travel the world now training therapists on addressing sexuality issues. I get to be in the media. I've been in Time magazine and Hustler magazine. I send both of them to my parents. They only read the articles. It's an interesting ride. But the interesting thing is, I was not depressed anymore, because it turns out that, having lots of sex is really good for depression, but also just talking, thinking, writing, and interviewing people about sex is really fucking good for depression.
Amazing. Probably a whole lot cheaper than Zoloft or the Next Generation.
Well, I'll say, I was in the swing lifestyle for years, and I was an advocate. I was an absolute. I promoted it. It's like, why cheat? You can just take them with you. There's no, just set your boundaries, set your guidelines. Mm-hmm. Let's get this out there. I mean, if that's what you want to do, then there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you go together. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily play in the same room together, or you play at the same time together. You play together, and in the morning you wake up together. You have to have those guidelines. Mm-hmm. It's when people get into, for me, it was when people got into the lifestyle because they thought it was going to make their relationship better. Mm-hmm. Because they were not communicating, so they thought, hey, let's do this because it'll make things better, and then they break apart.
I treat a lot of those folks, and one of the terms I like now is called designer relationships. You can design your kitchen to fit your needs, and now you can design your relationship to fit your needs. But that requires that you have spent some time in terms of understanding yourself, defining what your needs are, being willing to accept and communicate your needs, and then to respect the needs of your partner or partners, and negotiating all that. And unfortunately, we're just not teaching people how to do that. We're not teaching people, what I call sexual integrity. That's my last book, Ethical Porn for Dicks, is really about inviting men to have a sexual integrity in terms of watching porn, not watching it in secret, thinking about what your porn watching is about, what it means. Is it a part of you that you're willing to accept, or are you keeping it secret and ashamed? If so, why?
Yeah.
And we've got generations of people now that were taught abstinence-only education. And, and abstinence-only education is back now, and Trump has renewed funding for it. And I think that we are just engaging in nationwide neglect of people and generations by failing to teach them about sexuality. And then the wide world of sexuality is out there, and they jump in and drown. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's so much to be learned from all of these alternative kinds of relationships and practices of the people who have figured out how to do it with integrity, with thoughtfulness, with respect.
And I think that a little bit of it is that, you still have a partner that doesn't understand it, that doesn't understand why you're watching porn, why you're doing this, and they make you feel bad. I mean, I had a previous employee underneath me, and she was always so mad because her man wanted to watch porn all the time, and it's like, what do you care? He's not bothering you. Mm-hmm. If you don't like sex that much, he's not bothering you. Why do you care?
Yeah.
And, the only person that, we feel guilty because we think that we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And if you're conditioned to think that you're doing something wrong, then you will always think that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and it sounds like you do a lot of work with men. Like men, or that your book, obviously, Ethical Porn for Dicks. And since I don't own one, and most women don't have one attached to their bodies, although we can purchase them very easily now. But they're not quite the same. But the little plastic ones.
I don't agree.
Oh,
and I'll even discuss that. I don't agree with that one bit. You have to have a mindset when that is attached to you.
Oh, no. I'm not going there. I went another direction. So let me back up just a second. So, one of the things that I see missing, I've been working with teens now for about 10 years. And I've been in this working with children for a good almost 20 years. So, and doing community health. So, one of the things that I still don't see being taught is the joy and the beauty of sexuality. Mm-hmm. So you've got men running around hiding and watching porn in secret because it's something, it's dirty, haha. Right. It's still the mentality, it's better, but not yet, of finding the hidden Playboy. But then women, I feel like, are not socialized. Mm-hmm. It's changing a little, but still what I see the general message in, like I said, in public, when we do puberty education, is that sex is something beautiful and joyful. And so there's the women on the other side, like you were describing, like, why the heck is he watching this?
Why is he watching the porn?
Why is he watching it? Because she hasn't grasped the concept that sexuality is
and it's a little
okay.
It's a little insecurity, but like, why is he watching porn? What I don't give him enough? Well, you know what? You might not give him what he's asking for.
Do you know the old story of President Coolidge touring the chicken farm? So Coolidge and his wife were touring a chicken farm, and the wife is getting a lecture or discussion about the mating practices on the farm, and says, there's one rooster. She says, no, wait a minute. There's one rooster has sex more than one time a day? And they say, yes, ma'am. She says, well, would you tell the president that? Because apparently, President Coolidge could only get it up one time a day. I mean, being president with the affairs of state, pressure on, come on, give the guy a break. But they went to the president, and he said, now, wait a minute. Is the rooster having sex with one female chicken all day? Oh, no, sir, with many different female chickens all day. Would you tell the First Lady that? Because males respond sexually to novelty in a way that women do as well, but with less of a significant and strong kind of reaction. Porn offers that kind of novelty to men, that sexual novelty to men, in a way that allows them to engage with it without stepping outside marriage. And there are lots and lots of men who are watching pornography and masturbating to pornography because it's a way for them to not cheat. Mm-hmm. And there are conversations that couples can have about all of this stuff if they can get past some of the defensiveness. For instance, is watching porn cheating? Is masturbating to porn cheating? And then if it is, well, is it masturbating? Is it cheating if you masturbate in the bathtub? And then we end up having
only if you do it with the opposite hand.
Yeah, right.
Because then that's like a stranger.
That's right. Or if you do the thing where you lay on your hand until it goes numb, and then it doesn't feel like it's your hand as you touch yourself.
Well, there's a technique I hadn't considered.
There you go.
Thank you. Wow, I'm getting enlightened by this.
Yes, somebody taught me the things you learned.
Right.
Well, because you can't feel it, so it couldn't. Yeah, it's somebody else.
I agree. I mean, and I think that's not we got to teach our children not to be shamed by what they're doing. I know that with my daughter, who was a very young, sexualized person at an early age, much to my chagrin. However, my philosophy with her was, I can't stop you from what you're doing. I really hope that you'll wait. However, if you choose not to, I just want you to be safe.
Yeah.
I just want you to be smart. Because...
What kind of businesses are you looking
for?
Oh
my gosh.
Myself being a sexual person wouldn't think any less of my child because she has become a sexual person. and I don't want you to feel guilty. She'll kill me if she listens to this. So this morning I get up and I'm like, she goes, why are you looking at me like that? And I said, do you think you can at least close your door? My room's right next to yours. Mm-hmm. We've done the text messages where I've gone, oh my God, for the love of Pete, you're killing me. I'm over here by myself. So I don't want my children to feel bad for who they want to be, who they need to be.
Exactly. And I did not realize until recently, joking, I was talking before the show about the evolution of me going into comedy and the things that I do. And I had given them messages that, I thought I did the job. When you find your young children touching themselves, and it was like, okay, it's cool, masturbating. So it's like, okay, honey, sweetheart. Now, I didn't use the technical words because I didn't really want my 2-year-old running through the grocery store yelling vagina. She can yell vagina when she's 12, but at 2, she doesn't really need to do it. So I would tell them, we had our words. So it was popo. I said, popos are cute, popos are fun, but they're private. So that's okay, but they're cute, they're fun, but they're private. So if you need to do that, go do your. Yeah. So that's was my mantra. Popos are cute, popos are fun, and they're private. Trying to overcome the where I came from, which was extreme.
Yeah. Like
sexuality is horrible. My parents came from very extreme religious backgrounds, a stone's throw from being Mennonite, basically, and then coming out of that and being still in that hyper, that it's really not okay. It's really not okay. Somehow it's not okay. But seeing it played out in the churches that I attended when I was younger, and then as I got older and as a parent, then returning to the faith to try and stay in a very, very cold marriage. And but that idea of the joy, the joy in that it's not shameful. You talk a lot about shame, and I think, and that is your thing, and it's important because it's one thing that, for me, it's been a journey of discovering, acknowledging and talking about the joy, but after the joy then comes the shame. And so if you don't have that.
And that's interesting,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure you see that a lot.
I do, and it's my new project, actually, is a video series on YouTube called #No More Sex Shame. And, I'm interviewing folks about the ways that sexual shame has impacted their lives and how they've overcome it. Kind of like your podcast. It's me trying to take this in a positive direction and offer and empower people to overcome, this thing. What we know now is, whether you're trans or gay or a swinger or kinky, it is the shame that is attached to those behaviors and desires that really are causing most of the consequences or problems related to it. It's not the sexual behavior. And in fact, there was this fascinating study last year in Canada, in Quebec, where they did a survey, and a population-based survey, and they found that roughly 50% of the population was interested in one kinky sexual behavior or another. 30% of them had engaged in those behaviors, and that interest in sexual masochism, accepting or enjoying pain or submission, was correlated with positive life and sexual satisfaction. So these behaviors, these desires that we think are uncommon, turns out are not. Half the people listening to the show, probably given you guys, probably more than half of the audience is kinky and into weird sex. But it turns out there is no such thing as weird sex. It turns out weird sex is actually the normal sex. That the people who are not having weird sex, they might be the weird ones.
Right.
And
now, what a revolution that would be.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
To put that out there.
I had a girlfriend once who, her kink was pretending to be a 1950s housewife and have very straight, vanilla, kind of sex and behavior and interactions. And it was the kookiest thing. It was wonderful. It was brilliant. But I think we have to start looking and turning things on its head.
I agree. I am
I love the fact what you just said there about it isn't the acts that caused the problem. It's the shame and the reaction to it. So that's going to go back into also about being sure that the acts are consensual.
Well, I think that a little bit of it's just conditioning and of our upbringing. I mean, for me, in my opinion, because, like, for example, for you, the way you were raised, you felt bad about everything. So now you go home and you shame yourself when you do something that's outside of the norm of what you were raised with. Where, for me, although my mother was fairly dysfunctional, one thing I can say that was positive about my upbringing was the sexual awareness. It wasn't that, it wasn't an abusive awareness. It was there if we needed it. It was there if we wanted to understand it. We had the books. We had the limelight porn, the softcore porn stuff. That the neighborhood boys got to come over and watch if they had parental permission. However, there wasn't that shame. However, with my mom, the shame came from, "Are you pregnant?" Well, no, I'm not pregnant. I'm not even having sex yet. And then I'm like, oh, there must be something cool with this. So I start having sex. So, and that was my mother's issue put on me. I mean, that was her shame and her guilt about how she felt sexually abused. However, I didn't know that I needed to feel that way about myself. But I also didn't feel normal until I started meeting... Probably until I realized, yes, that I'm a submissive with men and I'm a dominant with females. However, I finally felt normal probably after I had overcome my cancer, because I started meeting like-minded people. And this was normal for me because this is where my brain ticked. And that was normalcy. I no longer had to feel bad about who... It wasn't that I felt bad about who I was, because I was a highly sexual person all my life. However, I never quite fit in. So now I fit in this crowd. And, some of my closest friends are still lifestyle people. Even though I may not be participating in it, they're still my friends. These are still people that I would trust my children with. Because these are people that I have been so vulnerable with, that I know that I don't have to be something that I'm not.
I talk a lot about, what is sexual health? What is healthy sexuality? And, we used to define healthy sexuality by what you did. That, if you had penis and vagina sex, that's healthy. But if you have anal sex, that's unhealthy. If you have sex in a marriage, that's healthy. But if you have sex outside of marriage, that's unhealthy. Well, now we know that it doesn't work quite that way. Instead, it's more how you do it rather than what you do. And so instead, we're talking more now about teaching people, again, to have sexual integrity, to look at issues of consent and mutuality, negotiation, communication. And this is gross, but you guys seem like a fun audience. That I tell teenage boys, teenage boys, learn about sex from porn. And unfortunately, they go out and do the things that they see in porn in bed because they've never been taught anything else.
Right.
So I tell young boys, don't come on a girl's face unless you can be a gentleman while you do it. And what I mean by that is, don't ejaculate on a girl's face unless you have talked to her about it first. She's into it. You have spent some time thinking about what it means to you and why you would want to do it. And you understand how it fits or doesn't fit into the sexual relationship you're negotiating. But all of that, I think, is lost in today's world where, we are so afraid of sexuality that it becomes this deep, dark, secret, shameful, kind of thing. And then when it busts out, we flip out and we do things like, we blame porn for teenage boys going out there and acting like little douchebags in bed with teenage girls. Well, guess what? We're the ones that gave them the phones. We're the ones that gave them the access to porn, and we never taught them what healthy sexuality looked like.
Right. It's permission. It's about permission.
And I'm pretty sure it was you that described, when explaining porn to young men, I think this is credited to you. You described it like it's the difference between watching, Too Fast, Too Furious, car chases. That's not reality. It's a whole lot of fun. That you can't do that in a car. It's fun, but it's fun to watch. Yeah. It's fun to think that you can get in the current movie, what is it, Baby Driver.
Yeah.
You know, they're saying tons of that crazy, out of this world kind of like chasing that you know that are not real.
Yeah.
That credited to you that you described it as, that's what porn sex is.
Yeah.
It's like the car scene. People, that's not the real. It's fun to watch, totally enjoyable, totally escapist, but coming all over the girl's face and her screaming that
fantasy.
It's fantasy.
Because
you might be able to recreate some of it.
That's right. And fantasy movies make hard things look easy. You know, whether it is driving, like, you know,
anal sex.
Yeah. Anal. Driving like you know, Vin Diesel and everything makes it look easy. But when you're really behind the wheel, that's hard work. It's scary. It's dangerous. And porn is fantasy, and it makes things like anal sex look very easy. You don't need to prep. You don't need to negotiate. Yada yada. You don't need lube. You just jump on. Porn makes, you know, giving women orgasms look very easy. All you have to do is jump on, pound away, bring a few friends.
And she's gonna love it.
That's right.
Every minute of it.
But
But
sex is hard work, and good sex is really kind of hard work. And that's actually the nice thing about porn, is that it offers people that fantasy escape from the hard work. Now, it's wonderful work if you can get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, we're not teaching people to know the differences between fantasy and reality in these kinds of ways.
I agree. And as a late bloomer, so to speak, coming into my own as a mature woman, it's been, oh my gosh, you know, it's been a hell of a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a hell of a lot of shame, and then working through the shame to let it go and to recognize.
Yeah.
You know, Nikki so easily says, you know, oh, I'm you know, hypersexualized woman. This is who I am. This is fine. It's always been this way. But to come into that and go, oh, it's just another place on the spectrum, and there's no judgment where you fall on that spectrum of low, high, whatever. And even using those words, low and high, implies better and worse. Rather, it's more of a range, like a flavor. Like some people don't like their hot chili. It's
right. I mean,
it doesn't make you bad to love hot chili. It's just who you are.
Well, that was my second book, was called The Myth of Sex Addiction.
The Myth of Sex Addiction.
And it's about that. It's about the fact that we are pathologizing sexual variance, sexual variations, calling it an addiction, calling it a disease, when really it is just various people on different parts of the spectrum. And the interesting thing now is we now know that self-identified sex addicts or porn addicts are not actually watching more porn or having more sex than anybody else. They just feel worse about it. So then the question is, why do they feel worse about it? It's because of their values. It's because of the sexual shame that they have.
Exactly.
And now, when they engage in those behaviors, they feel awful, and they struggle to control it because of the shame.
And if they happen to go to a therapist that they've been referred to from their local church at the Christian, there's nothing wrong with Christian-based therapy. I remember at one point in my marriage, I did insist on some marriage counseling. And we went to a therapist, and it was someone who hadn't seen either one of us, so they were neutral. We go in. He goes in and talks. I go in and talk. He goes in and I go. And her conclusion was that, you know what, you're the only one with the problem, because he's very happy with the way things are. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he works hard. It's hard. And basically, I was married to an asexual. I didn't have the language at the time, and now I do. But that therapist.
That's kind of sad.
I remember her saying, talking about, well, I'm tired after work, and when I get home, and I remember telling it, yes, my husband is a wonderful helper. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, he does laundry better than I do, much to my chagrin. He finishes. He doesn't multitask. Yes, he'll help with the cooking, help with the children. You know, we had, at that point, I don't think we had started fostering children, but it was but he doesn't hold my hand. He doesn't put his arm on me, you know, and I don't even know if I remembered, if I was even comfortable enough to tell him, like maybe we don't have sex, you know, like sex isn't happening, you know, and if it does, it's really awkward, and it might be done in 30 seconds. Yeah. But I remember her telling me afterwards, she's like, no, you know what? You're the only one with the problem. And I could see she had definitely gotten a crush on my husband because he presented very well. Mm-hmm. And I remember shaking my head going, well, it is just me. I'm the only one unhappy because there's no physical contact,
Yeah.
there's no emotional connection,
Sex
and there's
addicts
no
always
sex.
want more sex than their partner.
And when there's none, that was pretty sad.
That's right.
But
You want sex one time a month, and your partner wants sex one time a year. You're a sex addict.
Yeah, there must be.
And
you need to initiate.
Yeah.
But
it comes from this place of perceiving sexuality as this sinful, unhealthy kind of thing that we need to control and we'd like to keep out there. And it would be better if we just didn't have it. And we have to have it a little bit, but okay.
And if you don't have it, there are other things to be happy for. I can remember a neighbor. I knew this. We had a older neighbor, definitely elderly, and I was still very young at the time. Oh my gosh, yeah, no, I wasn't even 30 yet. And I remember her telling me about how she wasn't. It was an older Sicilian lady. She says, her husband did not satisfy her in the bed, but you just find satisfaction somewhere else in your life. She was really proud of her baking skills, her pizzelles that she made, and her wonderful. And I remember how much she loved really violent movies and how she would not tolerate any movies with sexuality in them, but it was okay to see people blown up to pieces. Yeah. And I remember thinking I would a million times rather have my children watching sex acts than watching someone get blown away and their face blown off, and that's acceptable.
Maybe that's my problem, because I would rather watch a violent movie than some romantic scene. Well, because it just doesn't. I'm like.
Mm-hmm.
But in her terms of saying that this is just what we accepted. If he didn't satisfy you, you just kind of had to go with it. I remember hearing her tell me that. And then later on, when we did the marriage counseling and being told that, you're the only one with a problem.
Well, that comes from the history of, women weren't supposed to like sex. Women who had orgasms there was something wrong with them. And, that sex, itself was just kind of a bad thing. I mean, did you guys have a granola bar this morning or for breakfast? If you did you masturbate afterwards? See, it works if you didn't, because
don't judge me.
Granola bar, granola and Kellogg's cornflakes were invented as bland foods to prevent masturbation and sex, because the idea was that
that's interesting to know. I didn't know that.
Spicy foods made you too focused on your body sensation.
It's an aphrodisiac, right?
And that's one reason why male circumcision is so popular in the United States, is because Kellogg promoted it as a way to prevent male masturbation. Now, it didn't work in my case. It didn't work in the case of most guys.
The argument is that it decreases sensitivity because of the constant stimulation. However, they really, really, really underestimated the incredible, how would you say it, accommodation of the human spirit. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Mm-hmm. I'll just use a little more. Thank you.
Yeah.
Little lube makes it special. Yeah.
And I think now that
it's all in the wrist.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing again now is just all this recognition that, people fall in different places on the spectrum of sexuality, and that for some people, sexuality is a really intense and important part of their life and their identity, and they need to be able to incorporate and integrate that into their life and into their relationship. For other people, they can kind of take or leave sex. The challenge is that we've been defining good and healthy based upon the people at the low end of the spectrum. Okay. And because all the people at the high end of the spectrum kept their sexuality secret and hidden. Now it's coming out, and now we're finding out, through the internet, through social changes, just how many people, are interested in these sexual diverse kind of options, and want to make sexuality a healthy and important part of their life. And goddamn it, they should be able to. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I argue for a lot.
And you in the community as, Dr. Lay, you have a lot of opposition, I would say, still, because of the pathologization. Thank you. That's a longer word than my tongue allowed me to say today, of sexuality in that. I mean, I remember when I entered into the medical field, homosexuality was in the DSM what?
Yeah.
1 or 2?
Yeah, it was in... Homosexuality was taken out of DSM 3.
3, but it was still in the 2,
yes,
right?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah, that was something. And trans,
Yeah.
it was considered.
Well, masturbation was a disease in DSM-1. DSM is the diagnostic manual for psychiatric disorders. Yeah.
And we're up to like
5 now.
Five. Yeah. So, exactly. So when I entered, well, the first time, I started in the nursing field, first at a vocational level because I left home at 17, and started at TBI because I had to. Long story. Anyway, so I started in vocational training. And so we did learn it as a vocational nurse. We had to learn the DSM. And it was taught. And I remember seeing, and then I got enough money and I started college. And I remember seeing my first Psychology 101 class. I was on campus and the film was, again, this young man was dressed as a woman. And this was the film about the pathology of this young man. And they explained to us in the film that his mother had dressed him as a girl since he was born, and this is why he was
always
this way.
The mother's fault.
Yeah, it was always, oh my gosh, schizophrenia. I remember all that. Those, it was always the mother's fault.
See, I grew up with Erica Jong, Joy Sex, Xavier Hollander, Best Part of a Man.
Was that the Happy Hooker?
Yes.
Okay. Hey,
I love that book. That was a great book. The Best Part of a Man was just such a pinnacle in my sexuality because it was about how that's not a bad thing to want or desire.
Wow.
And so and probably in more of the recent years and the more last couple of decades is Nina Hartley. She is such a big influence on
and a nurse,
the sex industry, and a nurse. And and I think it's amazing because I had a friend that was like blah blah blah, sex because she thought it was kind of bad, and I said, let me give you this book because it's an amazing book because it talks about how it even talks about like how anal sex of how you can't judge anal sex in the porn industry. You can't because it's not that way. It's not that way. You can't just think that you get to dive in and go at it. It really is. It's a building up process, and that's like I think that's a really great chapter in this book that she has out and about how people have this misconception about anal sex. Because in the porn movies, you're just sticking it right in, and everything's good. Well, no, it's not that way.
Porn is fantasy, and we need to teach people to know the difference.
And here's something to me. Of course, I am a baby boomer.
I didn't know she was a nurse, though. But that's pretty cool to know that now.
Awesome.
Yeah. Nina Hartley's she's a lovely woman, has been very supportive of my work, and she's a great lady.
I can imagine. Yeah. I am the only baby boomer in the room, and she's not. So,
borderline.
Yeah, life is.
You don't want to tell a therapist you're borderline.
Yeah, no, it's not a good place.
I'm borderline in a lot of ways. You just don't know it yet.
Oh, that's so scary. Yeah, but and also, I don't think it's just baby boomers. I think it's the generation behind me as well. Such a shift has happened in society so rapidly. Just like, many things that are going on in society now rapidly, like the reason we have an obesity problem, all this sort of stuff, the technology and the information explosion, the accessibility, to me, the magic of Star Trek becoming real, in the sense that we have our communication. Yeah, so the young generation coming up, they are knowing nothing but the openness. And the chasm that's being created, again, like the accessibility to the porn, without the understanding that this is fantasy. They understand that the chase scenes, kind of, not to a 16-year-old boy with his first car. He still thinks he can do the fancy stuff. That frontal lobe does really need to come along. But I see that there's kind of definitely a chasm in sexuality being out there. And what are the consequences of it? I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. But there is this chasm of everything's okay and it's wonderful. What do you mean it's not what's happening in the Twitter world and on YouTube is this
and again
crazy everything is okay, and this instant not understanding of, wait a minute, some of us are still We're not evil. We're trying to catch up.
Well, I do think that
makes sense.
With television, we've sexualized our children quite early, earlier than we anticipated, with hormones in our animals. Our children have developed. When I was growing up, the average cup size was a 34C. It is no longer that because of hormones introduced into our proteins.
And weight gain.
And our children have aged much more rapidly. So,
I think I am concerned about television and media as well, but for different reasons. The average American watches porn a couple of times a week for about 10 minutes a time. But the average American watches television 5 hours a day. And
that's a bigger problem.
Holy shit. The values, the attitudes, and I hate to be political, but fuck it, because we have a president who endorsed grabbing women without consent.
Exactly.
And where he is lying constantly without consequences, and what are people learning from that? That's what I'm really more concerned about. And I think we need to be talking about what kind of people we want to be. We need to be.
Do we want quality, or do we want just existence?
Giving people the language to think about these kinds of things. Yeah, my new book, Ethical Porn for Dicks. And actually, women have bought it for their husbands and boyfriends, and then written me and said, "Hey, I got it for him because he's a dick and he watches porn." But I ended up really liking it and thought it was very funny, and I learned so much about male sexuality and about porn and thinking that I had never even considered, which I love hearing. But the original title of that book was going to be, a gentleman's guide to porn use, and I think
I like that title.
The
second one sounds.
But we're old. We're old. Yeah.
But you know what? I love the ethical porn for dicks. I think it's
very catchy.
It's a great topic. It catches the attention.
Yeah. Just even the conflict. Wait, porn can be ethical? Are you a dick automatically when you watch porn?
Before we finish today.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, think about this is because I remember in 1988, the big book was Fire in the Belly. Remember Fire in the Belly?
I don't.
It was very much a very masculine. You you had two things. Fire in the Belly was for the men, and Women Who Run with Wolves was for women.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what was coming out in in that area of what I remember. And so you had this different perspective where Fire in the Belly was about the band's band, and Women Who Run with Wolves is a little bit of a feminist kind of thing. Not that because I'm not I don't consider myself a feminist.
I do.
I know you see. I know you do. Yeah. I actually consider myself a little bit of a male chauvinist. I totally do. I have a low opinion of a lot of women because I think that we as women have allowed ourselves to succumb to something that we're still not equal. And I know that feminism is about being, I can be better than a man.
No.
For me, I just want to be equal. I can do what you can. I can go fix my car. I don't need you. But I also would rather have you.
One of the things I really celebrate is, the popularity of 50 Shades of Grey. And which, for a lot of people, is kind of a poorly written book and really kind of fantasy and crappy. But the thing was, this book sold over 100 million copies. And, it's like...
made an audience.
Yeah.
There was an audience for it, is what I meant to say.
And, because it empowered women to now explore and embrace a sexual fantasy that they have been taught to be ashamed of and to hide from it. It turns out there are lots of women out there who like that submissive kind of fantasy.
But you know what? Here's the thing a lot of women don't know about. Anne Rice. Anne Rice, The Stealing of Beauty.
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely. That If you've never read it,
Mm-hmm.
that's pre 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Read it.
Yeah.
The story of O. It's out there.
But 50 Shades of Grey gave women the ability to embrace that fantasy and to do so in a feminist way. Because
yes, that's true.
Prior, women couldn't embrace that fantasy without being told, "Oh, well, you're not a feminist." And then there are lots of women out there who said, I am a feminist and I believe in equality and everything else. But you know what? It's really fucking sexy for me sometimes to be submissive in bed with my husband or my man.
And I think
I'll say
and that should be okay.
I'll say, as a submissive female to men, I'm a submissive female to men. A lot of submissive women are very dynamic, outgoing personalities in the real world. Every day we go out there. We are who we are.
Mm-hmm.
However, as a submissive, it's nice to know that I come home and I put myself in your hands and I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
My world disappears, all my stress and all my problems. And it's not about how I'm just weak. It's just that I know that I can be vulnerable because my submissiveness is a gift.
That's nice.
I can take that away from you because I've given you this gift of my trust.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Psychologically, we talk about escape from self, and that being, engaging in BDSM and being submissive is a way to take a vacation from the work of being yourself and being in charge of yourself, maintaining your identity, and give to somebody else, and take a little break from it. And there's all this neat research now coming out, looking at all these different kind of sexual, opportunities and activities, and finding that they basically go along with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that again has been one of my big arguments: is that we can't take sexuality and treat it separately from all that a person is. Sexuality is, one of the threads in the rope of who we are. And you can't take that thread out and act like it's not connected to everything else, because it is. And the things we desire, the things we enjoy, the things we fantasize about are a part of us. And what I want to do is really help people integrate that, to accept their sexuality as a part of themselves. One of the things I talk about is, who's your sexual role model? How did you learn what kind of sexual being or person you wanted to be? Or how did you...
Sorry.
Now, yeah. Women more often can answer this question.
I can't answer it.
Yeah.
There is none.
Yeah.
I have zero.
And I think, again, that's one of the missing elements. I think we need to create a dialogue and a dynamic in society and in media where we are, allowing people to have their sexuality be a part of who they are. George Clooney, I think, he was a guy who, for a long time, he was intentionally non-monogamous. He dated lots of women, and yet he was a good, upstanding man. Who was the basketball player who had sex with
Will
40
Chamberlain.
Yeah, Will Chamberlain.
Chamberlain.
So Will Chamberlain intentionally never married. And he said, I would be a bad husband. I'm not good at monogamy. And that's him saying, making good values decisions in consistence with, and that is the kind of role model that we need, as opposed to, like Bill Clinton, he gets caught with the blowjobs in the White House. He gets called a sex addict. And we have to treat sexuality as though it's this bad extra thing.
But here's my thing. We're animals. We are animals. It is natural for us not to be monogamous. What creates monogamy is that we've been taught morals and standards. And look at a dog. Let's think about a dog. A dog will go out and fuck anybody. Right. We're animals. But we have this thing.
And there's a variation. There's individual variation. There's some people that are kind of made from monogamy, and there's some people that aren't. Now, one of the really interesting things is that identical twins separated apart. If one twin has been unfaithful and cheated on their partner, the other identical twin is 40% likely to cheat as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a significant genetic kind of biological component that goes into this, but it's driven by our libido, by our impulsivity, by our mindfulness, by our communication and our negotiation ability. And so again, what I want is, a relationship, a society where we can allow people to say, hey, I'm really in love with you and I really want to be with you right now, and we're having a great time and all I can think about is being with you. But I know myself, and that around a year or two down the road, I'm maybe gonna be looking elsewhere. And is that something we can negotiate within our marriage, within our relationship? But we don't. We don't let people say that. Instead, I love you and I will love you forever. You're the one. Mm-hmm. Well, being the one doesn't work for some people. It might work for some, but not others.
Well, that's very interesting because for myself, I never consider myself a monogamous person. I'm not a monogamous person. However, I met the one person I wanted to be with for the rest of my life. I could see myself being monogamous with this person. They were also somebody that was in the lifestyle at the time. We had never been together in the lifestyle. We just kind of casually started talking, and we were together for a year. And when people would say, well, are you playing? And I'm like, we're not playing right now. And he saw it as me sitting there going, maybe that's not what I wanted. And when I would respond to him, it was, here's the thing. I see myself with you for the rest of my life. You are the person I see in years to come. I don't see somebody else down the road where I used to be able to. Mm-hmm. However, I can't say that about you. So when I answer that to people, I'm answering it in a perspective of your mind might change someday. Mm-hmm. I'm not denying the fact that I can't really answer for you. But I can say, at this time, no, we're not playing. We're not interested in being with other people. Because I found the person I want to be with.
And that's the negotiation from a place of self-knowledge and
design a relationship,
exactly.
Right?
And you, Judith, you said something a little while ago, and it struck me. You said as you were growing up, you just didn't have a language around sexuality and around self-determination around sexuality, and I've heard that before. I was flown out. I gave a talk in Salt Lake City to a huge group of Mormons about pornography. So, I was...
How enlightened of them to invite you.
Right.
Unless it was a frying.
Yeah, I was a little worried. I asked my friends, how would I get tar and feathers off? Just out of curiosity.
that was a really good...
That's right. Yeah.
I would have asked the same question.
Yeah, as I gave the talk, I was completely coated in butter underneath my clothes, just in case.
Just so you were ready.
Yeah, it was not a kinky thing. It turned out to be a little kinky.
You wanted to be ready.
But everything ended up fine. But one of the things that the folks shared with me, and I worked really, really hard to engage with them and support that, of course you're afraid of porn. Of course you are concerned about this because you've been taught to be. You've been taught a lot of things that really aren't kind of true about pornography. And taught a lot of things about sexuality that it turns out the rest of the world doesn't agree with. Mm-hmm. But they said, we don't have the language to talk about this stuff the way you do. And I think, again, that's one of the places where we can help. It's one of the places where podcasts like this help.
Right.
Because as we start to invite people to think about, whether it is, designer relationships or, ethical porn. I mean, can porn be ethical? Well, yeah, it can. The same way coffee can be fair trade coffee.
Consensual non-monogamy.
Yeah. And you can buy conflict-free diamonds if you don't want to support, the blood trade of diamonds.
Yes, exactly.
And so if you're concerned about unethical treatment of people in pornography, guess what? You can reach out and you can find ethical porn that is made by people who value consent, who treat the performers with value and respect, where people are not forced to engage in things that they don't want to.
It's not 18-year-old girls that just got off the bus
right.
from Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's people choosing to do things that they want to do on film. And it still shows the diversity of people. It shows people of different body types and different colors. And it shows the diversity of kind of sexual interests. Now, ethical porn can still be really crazy hot. And sometimes I think it's even hotter because watching it, that these people are doing it because they really wanted to do it. And that kind of turns me on.
So give me an example of some ethical porn. If you're not comfortable plugging, that's okay.
No, that's okay. Yeah, sure. I get asked that a lot.
Of course.
Jessica Drake is a good friend of mine. She's an adult film star. She actually was one of the people that Trump, kind of propositioned and grabbed and all kinds of inappropriate stuff. But she has a video series called Jessica Drake's Guide to Wicked Sex. And then there's also Pink and White Productions, which is a very kind of
you recently did something with them.
Yeah, they're wonderful people, and I actually one of their film stars, Jiz Lee, who's a gender queer porn performer. She actually helped me come up with the title to Porn for Dicks. Actually, Jiz prefers they, and so it there are good people out there. Louise Lush is another one who's down in Australia and doing this really neat ethical porn. And the thing is, it is people who are, bringing their values to the table and saying, I want to make porn that is consistent with my values.
Mm-hmm.
There's also something that I plug often, and it's called The Porn Conversation, thepornconversation.org. And it's a safe for work website that is run by an ethical porn maker who she and her husband came together and said, we're not teaching parents how to have conversations with their kids about pornography. And this website invites parents to start having this conversation with their teenagers about what porn is and isn't. And ultimately, I believe that conversation vaccinates kids. It vaccinates kids against the dangers of unhealthy sexuality by preparing them for what's out there. The reality is that the internet is a dangerous, scary place where we get bullied and harassed, where people are mean just because they can be.
You don't really know who's on the other side of that profile.
Yeah, and
it's just crazy how vicious and cruel people can be.
Well, I've been on the end of that. There is a website, Why Dr. David Lay is an Asshole. I'm very proud.
Is there really? I totally have to look it up.
Oh my gosh!
I don't think you're an asshole, but I have to look it up.
Well, yeah. I mean,
but
you
you have one, so
That's right.
It's okay.
That's
we
right.
all do.
Yeah.
It's like an opinion.
Here's the thing: the key is that you've ruffled somebody's feathers enough that gives you more attention and brings more to the table for you.
That's right. Absolutely. You've really made it when somebody goes to that kind of extent.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort.
That's what you call infamy.
That's right.
And yes, you've been hassled by more than that. Isn't that Miss Corrick?
Yeah, I was, very famously, kind of sadly, a couple of years ago, I was on Katie Couric's show, and again, I've done lots and lots of television, but I was on. Katie Couric had a talk show for a while, and
I remember that.
Yeah, and I was one of her last episodes, and I was also one of the last episodes for Anderson Cooper. Apparently, I am death on talk shows. But so Katie Couric had me on.
You know what? Yeah. I'm resistant. I'm resilient. This is not the end.
I should tell people.
Just saying.
I should tell people in advance before you bring me on your show.
I've ended more.
I'm the good luck Chuck of talk shows.
Katie had me on to talk about porn, and it didn't go real well. And I kept talking about research, and she said at one point she hit herself in the head. And she says, if you talk about research one more time, what about common sense? And I realized after that, I left that show. I mean, it was one of my worst TV experiences. You can see it on YouTube. I mean, if you want to revel in my pain, there it is.
No, thank you.
And
there's enough pain.
Yeah.
I don't want to revel in your pain, but I really am in awe of the fact that you were able to go on a show, you were able to stick to who you are and not fall into that.
Yeah. I went out and got really drunk afterwards. And,
good. Was it nice wine or was it mixed drinks?
No, it was bourbon. I like bourbon, and the bartenders who were male, I talked about, I talked about the experience, and they're like, dude, we watch porn. What the fuck's your problem, man? But
here's a shot on the house.
Yeah, they just kept giving me bourbon. And so, but the thing was, I realized, thank you, and that we were doing a good job of talking about these issues in a way that was accessible and that people could engage with. When I talk about research, everybody goes, And so instead, we needed to find a way to talk about this stuff from a common sense perspective. Now,
Exactly.
I am enough of a dick that I dedicated my last book to Katie.
Well, that was very dick-like of you.
It
I have
is,
to
yeah.
say, I saw that. I knew that
Yeah, it
about
is.
you. And
You know
I'm like, oh, that was a dick move.
It's dickish of me.
Here's
you know,
very-
yeah.
you know what?
It's like 12-inch dickish
I tried to
of
send
you.
her a copy, but
You know
Yeah,
what?
it's very 12-inch dickish.
You
of
know what
It's not
I would
even
say?
The casual
I would not
4-inch.
say it's necessarily a dick move. I would say it's I've risen above the fact that you were such a bitch.
You know what? Or actually, in reality, it's a very dog-like move. It's a very bitch-like move. It's a bitchy thing to do.
But the thing was, I wrote that. It's funny that book. I mean, I wrote it 3 times. I wrote one version, and it was just my kind of same old scholarly kind of academic kind of book. And then I wrote it again. And then the third version, it's kind of funny. I wrote on my phone in meetings. I get bored in meetings, and
No.
I write comedy.
So, yeah.
No, must have been one of those HMO kind of.
absolutely, yeah.
Like
So-
episodes of Care type.
Yes,
yeah.
totally. Yes.
Yeah,
So I
let's
would sit and write about this stuff in these meetings, and I tried to make it short and sweet. And I illustrated the book with what I call petroporn, which are dirty cave drawings of petroglyphs from
That's
around the
awesome.
world,
Yay.
including here in Albuquerque.
I do
up
stick
in the
figures.
hills. Yeah, exactly.
No, but that I shouldn't interrupt you, but
It's okay,
that
I love
is
it.
just. I was looking over the materials and stuff, and I was like, oh my god! Suddenly, for me, little orphan sexual here. Oh my god! Cavemen were drawing dirty figures.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god! So
Yeah.
it's not. It's
There is nothing in modern porn except fisting. Fisting appears to be the only modern sexual variation that doesn't appear to exist in history. Fisting appears to be kind of new. But everything else, whether you're talking about, ejaculations or, gangbangs or group sex or
whatever.
homosexuality, bestiality,
I mean, let's
it's all in cave drawings thousands of years old.
Caligula.
Yeah.
Well, see, that just goes back to fisting. I told you, Nicolina, there is no rational reason for fisting. I'm sorry.
You know what? I don't know. Maybe just some women want to feel the baby's head coming out again. I'm just saying.
I know.
I don't know.
Other ways to feel full. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
But
It's probably in a cave drawing, the other one I'm referring to.
Yeah. But writing a book for guys, about porn, I had to have pictures, but I couldn't make it too dirty because it would be a porn book. I had to write the section short enough for guys to read on the toilet because that's the only place guys.
Their
read,
attention
apparently.
span.
Yeah, exactly.
Their attention span on the toilet.
Yeah, exactly.
And some of them take a while.
And I wrote it as though I was just a guy talking about porn and sex over a beer, not me as psychologist, Dr. David Lake, going to educate you and inform you about what the research indicates. And well, fuck that shit. And so instead, it was, let's talk about this from a real place. And what I've been told is that really worked, and that people really enjoy it. They feel like it's a conversation.
So it's been doing well in the book.
Yeah, that
Yay for
book's
you.
going well. Yeah,
Not bad for a Berkey boy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
That's one. Well, you're not really a Berkey boy, but you've been adopted. So
yeah,
we'll
I've been here
hold
long
on
enough.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an adopted Burkania and also New Mexican. But Nicolina's the real thing.
I'm a freaking
she's a real
second
original.
generation.
But all my kids
My
are
daughter's a
originals, too.
third.
So, what's next? What book's next? I know you're working on something.
Well, I don't know if I'm actually going to write another book, honestly.
We need the lady side. Some lady needs to step up. A lady needs to step up.
Yeah, I've toyed with writing a book about police sexuality and calling it Blue Balls, which I think is pretty funny.
They're pretty.
I've dated a few police officers.
Well,
Oh my god, the testosterone is out the ass.
Yeah, and then their CO, or I guess they don't call them COs. It's not military. Has all kinds of excuses for them because they're you've read the quote from our local leaders. It's okay. They're hot, young, athletically fit people. That's why they're all screwing each other. And
the unfortunate part about it is maybe I think this might be like blue balls. I think it's a great subject, but maybe you could do it on abuse. and the police industry.
Yeah, there's lots
because
of
that is such a high.
Yeah.
Uh,
And men officers taking advantage of women
Right.
all over and everything else.
And actually, you could probably say from a biological standpoint, in order to have the psychological makeup to be able to aggressively face this kind of stuff every day, it's going to be paired with other genes.
Yeah,
and so how do we
that's
make
very
it
well
work
said.
in a way?
Yeah.
Well,
Sports stars, military, athletes,
It's there.
police, political leaders.
It's there. I
The
work.
same things that come along with that drive and assertiveness,
They're paired,
sexuality, and high
and
stimulation.
you
comes
know,
along
someday we'll get down to the DNA and we'll see it.
do you think it's part of it's like stature, where you are in
Oh yeah,
You mean
your
your physical
position?
height?
No,
or your
I-
stature, like
yeah. There's this
Yeah.
one British politician that I talked about in one of my books. I forget which one, and he said, it really doesn't matter how you look. I mean, women will throw themselves at you.
It's about power. Yeah, exactly. This.
Yeah, Henry Kissinger even said that.
Oh
I mean,
my
Henry
God.
Kissinger, come on, please.
Oh, I know. He's
Women
about
throwing
his
themselves
They
at
did.
him because of the power. And,
right. I mean, you can be an ugly person, but
yeah,
if you have a position or you are a personality in the film industry, and blah blah blah. Well, I did him. I fucked him.
Well, and there's a charisma too, the ability, and that is definitely like the whole quote star quality or charisma, whatever. I mean, I remember seeing Bill Clinton speak one time, and I was like, oh my gosh, there was something to his presence. I mean, I was several hundred feet away, but close enough to, and I was like, oh my god. There was something there that is, and it's, I'm sure it's genetic.
Well,
The ability to do what you need to do in a position like.
Well, let's bring this into this lifestyle kind of thing. In the swing lifestyle, when I was with T, 10 years together, I had to ask him because I went from I was a pretty kind of once I had my youngest, I had a weight issue. However, I never thought I had a weight issue. I knew I had a weight issue, but I never thought that it affected me. And then when I got into a relationship and we were together for 10 years, I now realized I had a weight issue. I had plastic surgery, I had a tummy tuck, and then I became sexually insecure. But before that, I never had that issue. Never thought about that. However, I had a blah moment, ADD. So when I think about this kind of thing, oh my God, I forgot what I was talking about.
Yeah, it's.
You say what you were saying before I interrupted you.
Oh no. Now we totally have dead air. I just really believe that yes, in order to be able to do certain types of work, you have to have a certain kind of genetic makeup to be able to do it. And with that, it's like Pandora's box. What is paired with that ability to get out there and be able to face someone down with a gun is probably paired with extreme sexuality. And then it's kind of like, in a way, it's like killing, the wild animal that the wolf that eats the livestock. We put them out in the wild, and it's not to excuse the behavior, but we do this re-release program, and the farmers get upset with the wolves that have been released. They kill too many livestock, and we kill the wolf.
Humans have always needed those high aggressive, high stimulus seeking, high energy, high adrenaline, high libido folks. They serve a purpose in our tribe for us.
They do a job that's
they do a job. They lead us. They force us to change and consider new ideas. And 50% of that probably is biological. It's coming out of genetics. Who we are is coming out of 50 to 70% is biology.
Yeah.
And again, I think that we can help people to have healthy lives by helping them to understand who they are, where they came from, what their biology helps them, what they bring to the table, and then to negotiate from that place of self-knowledge.
I remember what I was saying.
There are certain constraints. This is why you are the way they are. Back to your shame. Don't feel shame, but that is not acceptable.
Yes.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So let's put it, yeah.
Right.
Likely.
But I remember what I was saying is my point of that whole stupid story was, you know, I lost weight. I was at 185 and then I went down to 150. Okay. Lost weight. We'd have parties. And so like Terry would always complain about the parties. And I said, and then once I lost weight, we attract different types of people. And I said, so I had to ask him one day, I said, here's the thing you have to ask yourself. Do you want the pretty people or do you want the fun people? Because they're not one and the same. Because you can be pretty, but be vapid.
Yeah.
You can be fun and not pretty. Attractive, just not pretty. Not the beautiful people. So you have to ask yourself in that. You know, you were talking about having personality, charisma. Well, I'm cute. I'm not gorgeous. I'm not I'm the girl next door look. I have the girl next door look. However, I have a great personality. I'm bubbly. I move past it. And people are attracted to me based on my personality and not necessarily my looks. Okay, maybe my personality and my boobs, but not on my looks.
Well, yeah, the boobs are always a factor. You don't have to worry about that, but you have pecs, so you're good.
So, you know, but if you think about
biceps.
that,
I work at a gym too. So.
I'm not somebody that attracts people based on, yes, I'm cute, I take great pictures, or at least I have a photographer that makes me look like I take great pictures, because when I take pictures of myself, I kind of look weird. However, it's all about that. It's all about how we present ourselves. You know, and that's, it's charisma, it's personality, and so,
and then in the bigger picture of society, we all have a role to play.
Right.
And what a great role you have played. We're coming to the end of the clock here.
We are.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to have you back.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to get to do what I do, and I get to. You know, I get to help people as a therapist. I get to help people, you know, as a director of an agency, and have people get services and help, you know, with programs that I start and oversee. And then, you know, I get to share my writing, whether it's my books or my pieces on Psychology Today, or, you know, even freaking Twitter. And I get emails. I get emails constantly from people who say, you know, I used to feel so ashamed about this, you know, whether it is wanting to share my wife or liking sex too much or whatever. And people say, you know, when I read your stuff, when I heard you talk, I realized that I didn't have to be ashamed of that. And oh my God, that just feels so good. And then also people share, you know, now I'm having all this great sex. So my hope is
Which is like,
that's right.
That's good karma.
I get credit. Yeah, I get karma credit for all those orgasms that are out there that happened because of me.
And there's the whole other community that you know, the tantric community that's just
But
so
communication is key. It's like, if this is what you want, say it out loud. Tell your partner. The worst that they're going to do is say, "Oh no, I'm not into that." Here's an example. Do you remember Sex and the City? Did you ever watch that show?
I think so.
There was an episode where she's dating this congressman or a counselor. The guy's a counselor, and he says, "You know what I really want? I want to get in the shower and I want to get really clean, and I want to lay down and I want you to pee on me." And I'm sitting next to someone, and I don't really know how to respond to that. And I said, "Here's the deal. If that's your thing, you can do it once, but then we're done." And that's and that's about communication. It's like, hey, I'm communicating with you. If that's your thing, dude, it's really not my thing. I'll let you do it once. You get it out of your system, and we're done. Or you can find somebody else to do it with.
Wow, there's a lot of us out there, and I don't think it's just generational. I think there's because I know the community that I come from is still struggling with, wow, that's a thing? Okay. No, I've learned it's so funny. I learned so much about sexuality from doing stand-up because the comedians get up and they do porn jokes. And that's how I heard about learned about cuckolding. I didn't even know that was a thing.
That's
As they got up and they did cuckolding jokes.
Yeah.
So it was so fun to see that was like your first book. It was like, oh my God. And I had to go home and they made jokes about it. I had to go home and Google it to find out what the jokes meant.
Oh boy.
To understand what it meant, because I was like, oh, okay.
Oh.
And one of the first guys I dated after my divorce apparently was into the hot wives thing, because he had suggested something to me, and I thought, God, this guy's really weird. We never ended up having a relationship, and now I know it was a thing. That's what he was into, because he wanted to take me out.
It's the second most popular form of porn online.
Oh my God, he wanted to take me off to Vegas and have me, yeah. And I was, okay. Long story short, what you're doing is really, it's valuable. On the surface, from my background, I would have gone, oh, well. But you know what? No. Sexuality is beautiful. It's a part of who we are. It's one of the wonderful things about being human. And it's like when you think about becoming, it's not original to me, you've probably heard this before, when we're having the human experience, we are going back to, we are, who says it? The great religious philosopher, oh my God. I'll turn of the century. Anyway, we are souls having a human experience thing. And we don't become human for this spiritual. We become human like to taste chocolate, to feel a breeze on our face, to have the human experience. Yeah. That's why we are spirits or whatever entities.
We're not meant to sit in a box. I think that's
but
the
the
key.
human experience is to feel, to touch, to taste, to breathe, to smell. And to be denied that essential part of ourselves because it's not appropriate, how sad is that?
It is.
And I'm more of an atheist now. Like, this is our only run. So while I'm having this run, let me taste, let me feel, let me smell, let me understand this human experience. And by allowing people and making it okay to experience sexuality, namaste to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In a healthy way, and I think that's
in
always
a healthy way.
That's always my
absolutely.
my
it is. It's very healthy.
There's got to be
Just say it.
consent and negotiation, communication, integrity, respect, and that's frankly how we make this scary thing much less scary.
Yeah, because it is scary to some of us. Oh my God.
One of the things that I say, as a parent, and as anybody, the answer is always no unless you ask.
Yep.
And that is what you say. I mean, that's what I hear from what you're saying. Answer is always going to be no. And you're always going to feel guilty until you ask.
Yeah.
And then once you ask, the air is clear. We're done. It's either a yes or a no. Life is black and white in some perspectives.
Very cool.
As long as you say, hey, you want to whip my ass?
Yeah, there you go. That's a great place to end.
Well, no.
So on that note,
So on that note, this is Nicolina Nixon.
Thank you guys for having me.
So much. I'm so glad. I would love to have you back again. I'd love to talk about your other books.
Yeah, and we have some great people coming up.
We do. We have Angora.
Angora next week.
And
the name of the podcast
is oh my God, you're going to make me add.
Oh
Hard question. My Way.
Huh?
I think her thing is My Way,
My Way,
My Happy Place. That's
my happy place.
My happy place, because I actually saw a picture of her, and she's got a meat cleaver in her hand, and you can see the reflection in her hand, and it's called My Happy Place, and I thought that is an absolutely fantastic title.
That's cool.
And you know what? They can catch Dirty Girls
Dirty
soon.
Girls
This coming Friday,
the 11th at Rio Bravo Brewery.
We're both doing a set.
We are doing a set for the amazing Mary Bird. Happy birthday again.
Yeah, happy birthday.
She was here last week. And then on the 27th, we have Eddie back. Eddie Tafoya talking about his
previous book.
His previous book, The Anatomy.
Comedy book.
The Anatomy of a Wisecrack.
Yeah, Anatomy of a Wisecrack.
I'm terrible. I'm terrible at this. I admit.
So he's also a doctor, technically.
I confess that I am an Audible reader.
Oh yeah, totally. I listen to books on tape all the time.
Audible is my
Sadly,
passion.
My books aren't books on tape yet. We've talked about it, but no editor or publisher has ever taken the plunge to put my books on.
Well, if you ever need a reader, I can read ethical porn for books.
I want Jonathan Frakes to
Jonathan
read.
Frakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure you don't want William Shatner? Come on.
Yeah.
That was a joke. That was a
I have an
joke.
interesting history of Shatner. It's a long story.
We'll talk about that one after.
All right.
So thank you, Nicolina,
Thank you so
once
much.
again.
Thanks
for
again.
having me. Great
Thanks
show.
for coming. I'm so glad you got to come. This is Nicolina Nix, and we'll see you next week on Women, Wit, and Wine.
Woohoo!
Have a great evening.
Cool.